we've been wanting to talk about Blade Runner for a long time. On your suggestion, what was were the things that made you want to talk about that, or made you realize, well, this is something that we have to dive into and extract gems from?
Man, well, the first time I saw it, I mean, I told you before that when I watch a movie, a lot of times the first thing that hit me is sort of a lot of the symbols and archetypes, and seeing a little bit of the structure between characters, like who is a mirror or an opposite of another one. How does this character represent the sky god, or how does this character represent tyrant mother, kind of stuff. So the first time I saw Blade Runner, just all of the iconography was hitting me, and it's like, oh man, there's so much here to dive into and pull out. And that because there was so much, I've always wanted to have a way to talk about this on my own, but I've just never done it. So since you and I have been doing this stuff together, it's a perfect opportunity to finally talk about these things. So that's it. Yeah.
I'm different from you in that sense, in that I've mentioned this to you before, but I only realize these things on reflection. When I watch something the first time, when I'm watching it, I just have the most basic surface level understanding of it, and I'm just consuming it almost mindlessly. And then I think about it. But once if we have a project like this one, or Arrival, or whatever we've talked about in the past, then I'm seeing it with those goggles on. And so I was shocked by the contrast between watching it in the theater however many years ago it was when it came out, and having almost a nothing burger experience. And I didn't enjoy it at all. And then watching it this time, knowing we're going to talk about it, and it's just everywhere. Couldn't write fast enough. I mean, my notes are very long. I couldn't write quickly enough. And I think there's definitely a lot here. What do you think about starting, maybe not with a summary, but maybe starting with setting up the world, just for people who haven't seen it, just to kind of build a little bit of infrastructure of understanding or context that can help people who have seen it, but maybe it was a little while ago, or haven't seen it, so that as we go through this, and by the way, this is not a movie review, this is going to be more of a discussion of the motifs and symbols and mythology and psychology that is implied in the film, as we've done in our previous conversations. Maybe a little bit of world building to help out with that, so that what we say later doesn't feel like utter nonsense.
Yeah, you want me to do that?
Take a whack at it, and then I might say a couple things as well. But yeah,
cool. So just briefly and broadly, Blade Runner 2049 is set 30 years after the events of the first Blade Runner. We've got our hero is K, played by Ryan Gosling, and he starts out the movie. He's just going to go basically do the same thing that Harrison Ford was doing for his job. He's a Blade Runner, so he's going to retire replicants that are now essentially illegal. He's got to retire these older models that are now considered essentially obsolete and dangerous. So he goes and tracks them down, and he kills them. And so the world now there's been a massive break of the ecosystem. There's, no food, nothing is real. Everything's artificial. Animals are artificial. There's no real wood. So it's a pretty barren wasteland. You can think of
barren is a good word for it, for sure. That's the word I wrote down.
Yeah. So it's a wasteland motif, and that's essentially the world of Blade Runner 2049. And Kay is just, it starts off, he's going to go retire a replicant, an older model replicant that has an open-ended lifespan, but people feel freaked out by him. They think they're dangerous. And so he's on his way to do that. And then he does it. And on his way home, back to base, back to the police department, he sees something that catches his eye. And that is the call to adventure.
The call to adventure.
Yeah.
A box underground under the roots of a dead tree. It really couldn't be better than that. I mean, psychically and thematically.
And I wondered, because he sees a daffodil, he sees a small flower, and that's what catches his eye and stops him from just going back home. And so he sees that, which then leads him to tell the little drone he has in his spinner to survey the area around this tree where the daffodil is, and that's when he finds that box buried beneath the ground, like 30 feet down, or something, which is that's a metaphor for the unconscious.
For sure. And the fact that it's a tree and things are underground, obviously a psychic metaphor, but also a metaphor for, the axis mundi and all of that stuff that I'm sure we'll get into. I would add to that the psychic reality of this world. So you described I think the word barren is perfect. It's barren. And barren is the perfect word because it relates to the world and the ecosystem, but it also relates to what has been the reality for the replicants, or these synthetic people, these artificially created people. That has been the reality is that they've been part of the barren landscape. They've been, if you say one of the things in the barren landscape includes replicants, these artificial people, which is now changing. And so the barrenness applies to the ability to conceive as well. Yeah. And the transition out of the state of being part of nature as barren to nature as creative force. But I think also the psychic reality, or the spiritual reality, the backdrop is also, I think, that humankind has reached a spiritual dead end. Mm-hmm. And it's almost as though something in the impetus of evolution, creative forces of the universe conspire to always find the next iteration. And if that is represented by trees of the evolutionary trees and branches on those trees, then humankind is on a dead branch, and there was a splitting off at some point, and they're at the end. It seems like they're at the end of that branch, maybe not in the physical form, but in the spiritual form, continuing to reach in the physical realm, giant naked women going to other planets, all being led by a blind man, right? Yeah. Into a great future that we would now today say, yes, let's go to the stars and all of that, but still is the blind, I think, spiritually. And the human covered, then that contrast with the human planet covered in junk, piles and piles of junk. And what do we do as soon as we cover everything in junk? We leave. Go to other planets and talk about going off world and getting papers to go off world. So I think that's another important part of the backdrop for the story.
Yeah, I think you calling out the word barren is it's an important word to bear in mind throughout the entire film, because because you open up on a scene of a barren landscape. And then you get into Nyander Wallace's birthing chamber, a birthing of an artificial being. The first thing, it's a female, and the first thing that he checks is her womb, and he sees that this replicant can't bear children, so he disposes of the replicant immediately. So again, this barren quality is very important in the film. The idea of birth and pregnancy, we find out later that Sean Young's character from the first movie, Rachel, actually did bear a child. And so there is that, I think what you were talking about a second ago, kind of like the Jurassic Park, nature always finds a way kind of deal, where nature, reality, Rachel found a way to bear children, and she's a replicant. She's not supposed to or most of them don't, but she does, and so she's the.
He describes the last trick of
Yeah.
Who is the original creator of the replicants? Tyrell. Yeah, it's his last trick, as though that's might be something that he planned on, or he planned for, or something that he wanted to come to pass because he knew the score and knew that was a necessary step.
Yeah, and so to maybe plug this theme into a broader context, one of the things that Campbell talks about, and one of the important themes to him is the theme of the barren landscape, which was written about by T.S. Eliot in the poem "The Wasteland," and that poem is also an echo of Arthurian legend. So in the Parzival story, Parzival finds his way by accident to the Grail castle, and the land around everything is a wasteland. Everybody's having hard times. It's like there's like a desolate nature to existence. And so he makes his way to the Grail castle, and the Grail king comes out and he's infirmed. He has his penis has been run through because one day the Grail king went out to fight this knight, and he was dehorsed. I forgot what the word is when you're thrown off your horse. But anyway, he was knocked off his horse by the knight he challenged, and also he was wounded in his junk. And so now he's essentially that's symbolic of losing his potency.
Right.
So the Grail king has been in this castle infirmed for such a long time, and as a result, the land around has been made barren and fruitless. So Parzival, as the hero, is the one that's supposed to come back in and heal the Grail king. And so, again, knowing Denis Villeneuve, it just seems, or knowing his work, it seems right that he is familiar with all of these motifs, and he's just using them as a tool to tell a story now.
But part of that wasteland is, I think, on the collective level, something like the collective id, which is the junk landscape, and then the thing which is going to rise out of that junk pile landscape has for a long time been part of that junk pile landscape. And it's almost as though nature's been running experiments on that, and eventually something is going to come out, right? In the Parzival story, I guess then Neander Wallace would be the Grail King in a sense, and I think it's very important that he's blind. I think that because he's blind, he's or seems to be the most powerful person in this story. He represents humanity and where humanity is going, and I guess the values of humanity, and yet he can't see where he's going. He has no idea where he's going, and he says in one line, I think, when he's looking at the new specimen, he describes as a specimen because to him they are just specimens, right? They're just one of the things that he's discarding, like the junk heaps that is going to allow him to eventually get to the stars, because he doesn't know what rejuvenation really is. He thinks rejuvenation is constant reaching. He thinks rejuvenation is the next star system, or the next thing that he can accomplish. He thinks that's progress. So because he's blind, we can see that he's leading humanity in this direction, which is veering off into probably something like humanity's extinction, but is also blind to what real rejuvenation looks like. And when he says, "I know what's real," he asserts it in an almost
that was Harrison Ford who said that.
Was it Harrison Ford who said that? Didn't he?
Yeah.
Didn't he make a reference to what's real when he's looking at the specimen? Maybe it wasn't "I know what's real," but there's a reference to the specimen in reality, isn't there?
So when he says, "I know it's real," that's Nyander Wallace is interrogating Harrison Ford, and he says, Nyander is saying, he's asking Harrison Ford, was your meeting with Rachel, was it planned? Was it love, or was it a mathematical computation that did all this?
Yeah.
Not to derail you, but I just thought it would be.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I think so I think his lack of vision sort of stands for his inability to see what is coming out of the id into consciousness or something like that.
Yeah, can I pick up on a couple of things there?
Yeah.
So one of a couple of comparisons I thought to make with Wallace is that I think he represents a couple of aspects. One is I think he's modeled after Vishnu dreaming on the cosmic ocean. So when we see him,
the shimmering water.
Yeah. So that shimmering water would be the cosmic ocean. And so Nyander Wallace, we don't ever actually see him put his hands down to make anything. It just seems like this stuff comes out of his mind. So like Vishnu, he's dreaming the world into existence. And so I think that imagery might have been inspired by that story. And then also Love, his assistant, calls him a data hoarder, which reminds me of Tiamat and Marduk and Indra and Varitra. Mm-hmm. So in the story of Indra and Varitra, Varitra is swallowing up all the waters, hoarding all the waters. And then Indra slays Varitra and releases the waters so that they can go back out onto the land and make it fruitful again. So it seems like I thought that Denis Villeneuve may have been painting that character as off of those two mythological characters. And then also, I think when Love puts that little device on his neck, and then those flying mechanical or tech fish come out of the doorway. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's supposed to be. So he views the world around him through technology.
Right.
So his vision, he only has vision when he uses technology to give him vision, because those little things in the script are called barracudas. And when he's about to examine the woman, he views the woman through the lens of technology.
Right.
And it seems like, I think,
rather than his human eyes, rather than the eyes of a person.
Right. Yeah. And so, and there's a couple of lines that he says. One of them is, every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We've lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered. So I feel like, and I wonder if this is sort of a dig, maybe like what you're talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, that just the nature of how we make progress, progress is by a disposable workforce. I mean, look, who built the railroads in the United States? Who ran the plant, or who worked on the plantations in the United States, and that kind of thing. And then, pick other countries, and they have the same kind of thing too. I mean, God, look at who built the pyramids. It was slaves. So all of these, and Rome and Greece, there was slavery there too. And even, modern slavery today, we've got wage slaves, factory slaves, essentially. Mm-hmm. And if one of them disappears, nobody blinks an eye. You just replace them. And I mean, I don't like that. I just think that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Wallace is meant to embody that current reality, or that current phenomenon. It's something we feel today.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a commentary on the definition of progress. And when we feel that we make progress technologically, we feel we have the newest thing, the newest advance, we look to the next thing, we watch YouTube videos of people talking about technology, and we get excited about that. but we're living in the realm of the non-real in a sense, and that's another motif we can talk about. But it seems like everyone in this world is desperate for something real when they have everything that you could possibly imagine. It's sort of like when Freud talks about what you would expect to see and what you in fact see in civilization and its discontents. It's like, look, you would expect that if you have a train, then that's going to make you that much happier, because then you can go see someone or you can travel somewhere. And if you can find out that your nephew or whoever has reached his destination safely, you would expect that to make you incrementally happier. And yet, says Freud, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
And then he goes in depth on why that is. And maybe we can get into that. But I think it's sort of following that idea of Wallace has lost his human eyes, or the eyes maybe to look within himself and do
humanity.
Yes, do maybe psychic work on himself or as a representation or a symbol of humanity, on humanity's ability to do that. And so since he sees everything technologically, since he sees everything through the lens of that measurement of progress, and everyone does, modern society does, it's reached an extreme where now nothing is real anymore, and you can see in starker relief that is not the answer, because it's like when Freud said that, he was saying it when it was 5% true. Now it's 99.9% true, and so it's much more obvious. It's in starker relief, and so when something pops out of the trash heaps, when something pops out of this unquenchable urge to get more and do more and build more and have giant sex women robots walking around the city, when one little thing pops out, then immediately I'm willing to scrap it all and die for it. Immediately. Well, virtually immediately, right? I mean, K doesn't have to, but he sees something real at last.
It's irresistible.
It's irresistible, and he can't not go down that road, even though it doesn't end well for him in terms of his life, right?
In terms of his mortal coil, yeah,
exactly.
Well, another cool way to state in a sentence, Neander Wallace's. Oh, by the way, Neander means new man. It's like it's Neander, but it means new man. So I didn't really.
Is that the prefix for Neanderthal, or is that the same root?
I don't know. It might be. I looked. So Wallace is Welsh. It means like. I don't know where they got Wallace from, but yeah, Neander is related to, I think, Neander, which is a German name. I forgot. But one way to state his is he can't see without technology. Mm. So, and think that one sentence. Think about today. Think about how that applies. In what ways today, right now, would we not be able to see without technology? Right. So, yeah, I think that might be a sentence for application.
Absolutely. And I think maybe not something that's I've seen talked about much about the film, but I think it's a pretty good takeaway for the present day. And because I just finished Freud on that, it's the same. It's the same thing.
As far as civilization as discontents, I wanted to. I think you'll like this. I think at the beginning of the book, he's talking about something that is spot on, and it's 100 years later, and he's talking about exactly what you just said. That we think we would be happier with all of this quote progress,
civilization.
Yeah, and it's he calls it. And he's critiquing it and saying, well, we're still dissatisfied or unfulfilled, right? Yeah, in a wasteland in this way and that way, and it was so nutty and cool not cool and like I feel good about it, but the fact that what he wrote 100 years ago felt like he could have written it yesterday and it would still be applicable.
Well, I feel like it's a gradient toward the 100% mark, right? He said it. What year did he write that? I don't know, but he said it, and that established a sort of baseline percentage. And since then, we've been moving toward 100%, because now, I mean, social media makes that stand out in even sharper relief. But we don't see that stopping. That we're just continuing to optimize for. We're just continuing to optimize for this thing that we think is a proxy for our emotional, spiritual happiness, which isn't one, and we know it somewhere deep down, but eventually we might not know it anymore. We might forget it completely. We might then take a branching road on the evolutionary path that is too late, essentially, right? I think that's where humanity is here. I think they've already branched, and it's too late.
Okay. Yeah.
And so nature is responding to that with a solution. Okay, it's too late for the humans. Replicants, procreate. Let's start fresh.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, I feel like he's also supposed to be. So he kind of looks like Jesus, and I think again that's to reinforce. We look to technology for salvation, and in this case he's trying to develop a technology to help get away from Mother Earth, essentially where we're from, the reality we know and what we're bound to and born from, and rather than fixing where you are, which I think is something that Stephen Hawking or who's the cosmos guy,
Neil deGrasse Tyson, Carl Sagan.
No, Carl Sagan. Yeah, one of those guys had a quote about, if we really, this is paraphrasing and truncating, but if we really knew what was good for us, we wouldn't be trying to get away. We'd just fix where we are, kind of thing. Something to that effect. And so he's a sort of blind savior figure, and he wants to take back Eden, is what he says. And I think that might be a reference to the nostalgia for paradise, as though there was something in the past that was perfect, but now we have to get out there to get what's perfect, rather than we have to get away. We have to put people in really shitty conditions, shitty working conditions and living conditions, and get away, rather than, like, we got to get off world. We've got to get to the stars rather than fix where we're at. So it seems, again, that is a feeling you can look around and see today.
There's a Christ aspect to it, but you could say that there's a Christ aspect to both Kay or Joe and him. Sure, but you could also say that there's a God aspect to Wallace, and there's a God aspect to Deckard, because Deckard. Well, we'll get into this, I think, later, especially, but Deckard is the one who brings down the powers of nature and rejuvenates. And so, while he's a man, he's a male god, there's a feminine integration that brings about rejuvenation, whereas Wallace is pure creation, but creation from culture, or creation from the tyrannical, or creation from the purely paternal, or the archetypal masculine. Make something, conquer. I don't have enough goats. Morgan, need more goats. It's that sort of maybe rational Hegelian progress in the direction of culture only, with that, and farther away from the source of life, the wellspring of life. And Deckard is kind of the opposite of that, even though he's a man, but he's the opposite of that in a sense, another type of God.
Yeah, and to bolster what you're saying, if you look at Nyander, he's clean cut, he is kept together, and then when you see Harrison Ford later, he's like a bum. He's living alone. He's all scruffy and scrappy. So he's a little bit more chaotic. Where if he's a god, he's a more like chaotic god. Where Nyander Wallace, he's more of this organized, structured hierarchical god.
A little more Apollonian.
Yeah, I think those apply. Yeah,
I'm not sure if Dionysian applies to Deckard, because I guess Dionysian is a confusing image to me in general because it means different things, right? Because Dionysus represents the feminine in that he was born twice, once of the man, once of the god, and once of the woman, right? But also he represents the chaotic side, and I don't know if Deckard is supposed to suggest that. He does drink a lot. I don't know. I couldn't quite. I was trying to make it fit, but I couldn't make
millions
it fit.
And millions of bottles.
Millions and millions of bottles of whiskey. Could we talk a little bit about the box under the tree and the fact that it's a dead tree and the unconscious? I think Villeneuve is. We did. We've done what? We've done how many movies of his? Two, right?
Yep.
And,
Enemy and Arrival.
Yes. Enemy.
We should do more. Enemy was very much about was all unconscious. The entire movie, I think, is what we finally kind of came to, right? Yeah.
I think that this one is interesting because it does that too, but it tells two stories. It's an unconscious story, but it's also a civilization story, and you get kind of both for the price of one. Maybe it's just because we've been reading Denial of Death, but I saw some really interesting parallels in here is this Philistine in his little flying car doing what he's supposed to do, conforming, and then suddenly the illusion is shattered, right? The illusion of culture is shattered in front of his eyes. And so once the illusion is shattered, if you try to come back to being the Philistine, to being the person who you can't, unless you were going to become more neurotic, probably. So then you have to start the process of individuation. Then you have to start walking around the mandala toward the center. There's nothing else you can do. The call to adventure, it seems like it's a choice, but it's not a choice, because if you refuse the call, then it's death one way or the other. But one death is the right death, and the other death is sort of an immediate death. Even if you live 100 years, you're dead, kind of death. So, if you want to touch on that, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was thinking, there's a quote about, I forgot who said it again, but it's something to the effect of those that sort of go along with fate. It's like she's a lover, or she dances with them, but
the Tao
the end of it is, and those who resist fate she drags. So if you go with fate, if you go with the fact that you're going to die and that your body's going to decompose and you're going to get old and that kind of stuff, then you joyfully, you go with the Tao of it. You joyfully dance with those rhythms and the ups and downs. But if you fight it, it's going to drag you along no matter what. So you can either dance with her, or she can drag you. Well,
it reminds me of the McKenna quote, "Nature loves courage," or nature. I think it's "Nature loves courage," right?
I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, he says that. He says, "The mushrooms told me nature loves courage."
Yeah. He would say that, wouldn't he?
He would say that, wouldn't he? Well, anything else on the tree or the box underground that you wanted to touch on?
So the idea of the box being something that erupts into consciousness, that's something that I think Jung says a lot, this eruption into consciousness when, as you go through life and you're compelled by nature to confront some new truth, then something will bubble up from your unconscious, and a lot in reference to the shadow, I believe, and the shadow's got to get out. So the fact that this thing that was underneath the earth in the unconscious now has to be dealt with. And then the world tree, like you mentioned earlier, the axis mundi, for sure. But it sounds like you have more thoughts on it.
Well, not really, other than other than I think it leads to the next thing, which is the anima part of it, because so this is the sort of eruption into consciousness that begins, if followed Taoistically, is that a word? If followed, leads to Jung's description of the process of individuation, which is to integrate the different aspects of your unconscious and move closer to yourself, which is sort of a barometer for equilibrium with where you should be psychically in order to not suffer, something like that. Like the self knows what equilibrium is, and it sends up messages to the ego, and sometimes that builds up into the eruption into consciousness, which then can allow you to sort of follow it downward. And so I think I'd like to then maybe tie that into, and I know you wrote this down in your notes as well, the anima stuff, with his girlfriend Joy, and maybe her different iterations as anima, or the feminine in the unconscious. I mean, she's literally a projection, so that's an interesting thing. But
that's Denis Villeneuve hitting us over the head with
a
Jungian
I got it.
sledgehammer.
But but she's different kinds of projections. She doesn't stay the same. Why do the mobile emitter thing? Well, I guess
the emanator.
The emanator. The mobile emitter is a Star Trek reference.
How dare you?
I didn't know what else to call it. I forgot what it was called. So, because the doctor in Star Trek Voyager has a mobile emitter. I apologize to anyone who doesn't care about that. I care.
The 5 people that are going to watch, they're pissed.
If I get 1 out of 5, I'll be deliriously happy. So she starts off as a very rough projection that seems to have a lot of kind of bugs and is very non-real, and then becomes more real and has some substance because the rain interacts with her a little bit, and she's able to. It's almost like she can touch him. Then, as he's moving through this process of individuation himself, which is within himself, to try to find out what he is, to try to find out what he's being told by his memories, to try to find out, to follow the next thing. Intuition is telling him what to do next, and to just do that next thing, because he doesn't know where he's going to end up, but he can just sort of follow the next thing. As he's going through this difficult process farther and farther down, his projection of the feminine is changing form constantly, in a sense, always there with him, but not left behind until the end, until she becomes both physical and the projection. So I wonder if you made anything of that sort of, as he's awakening into authentic being, she goes from this "Hi, honey, I'm home" sort of thing, which is the cultural standard. This is what you do. You come home and say, "Hi, honey, I'm home. How was your day? I cooked you some meatloaf," whatever she says.
The True Detective problem. Right.
That's the start. But then he doesn't leave her behind. She follows him along for quite a while as he goes and changes the way that she's represented. So I was interested in that. And I wonder if, at the end where she has a body because the prostitute girl is inside of her, if that's something like a combination of Eros and agape potentially. But if you have any ideas around that, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. So I think the way we get introduced to joy. So first
J-O-I, joy, not J-O-Y, which is a great spelling. It should be spelled that way.
Yeah. And what do you mean? I didn't catch up. I
think it's spelled J-O-I.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, which is a better spelling. It should be.
Oh, okay.
I wish all. I don't like the name Joy spelled J-O-Y, but I like it J-O-I.
Okay.
Aesthetics. Yeah.
We did it again. So the way we get introduced to, his perception or he's going through this process of individuation throughout the movie. I think that's what the entire movie is about. As I can't wait to explain later, I think it's the movie is a record of his movement through the Kundalini yogic chakra system. All right. So he finds the box beneath the ground, and then I think he goes back to the headquarters, and they open the box and they find the dead body or the bones in there. And upon closer inspection of the bones, they find that these are okay, first off,
bones of the mother.
Yeah. They discover that, okay, this set of bones is from a woman who is giving birth and died in childbirth. So that's the first discovery. And then upon closer inspection, they find out, wait, this is a replicant. This breaks the world, as his boss says.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. And so after that, the next scene is him going back home. And that's when we're introduced to Joy. And Joy, I don't know, do you want to explain a little bit of the anima and the idea of the anima? Or do you want me to do it?
I mean, go ahead. I think the 2-second version is that it's a projection of, usually for a man, it's the projection of the feminine of yourself, potentially externally, which is the complement to your masculine side, in a sense. But it takes on different forms at different stages of life and different stages of maturity. Von Franz describes 4 levels of the anima, and that might be represented in your dreams at the highest level as an old woman and at the lowest level as a young woman.
Yeah, I didn't know the Von Franz stuff. You'll have to tell me about that. So if somebody wants to see us talk about that stuff more, you can watch the Enemy podcast, because that whole movie is about the anima, essentially. So when we see Joy for the first time, she looks like the typical 50s housewife kind of ideal from the States, from the US. And she goes through a couple of iterations. She just changes her dress, changes her look immediately in front of Kay's eyes. And she's there to serve. She's just trying to please him, make sure he is relaxing and all that kind of stuff. And she is a literal projection of Kay's ideal female. And we know that she's an ideal because there's a section where there's a pause on her program, or she's standing there in front of him and she kind of pauses, and this user interface pops up next to her, and you can see these different stats that Kay has plugged in. It's right. Oh, she's supposed to be like ethnically Cuban, about this tall, hair color, eye color. So he gets to design his ideal woman, or for him, it's his ideal, his anima. And so the anima is the projection of the ideal female. And Jung always
the animus is the opposite for a woman. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, these are like Jungian ideas from 100 years ago. So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see how he would apply these things to like a homosexual relationship, what he would say. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
I think we got into that in the Her podcast a little bit. We talked a little bit about that. I think we finally agreed that he would, because he's Jung, he would probably adjust his formulation of it for modern times, because he's not Mr. Rigid by any means.
Yeah. That's another discussion, but sure. I think to me in the script also, so I read the script as well. I found it online and read it. Written into the script was not only joy, but also boy. So there actually was an animus, or a male version of joy, but it's not seen in the movie. And I bet that they didn't include it in the movie just because not including it keeps the emphasis on Kay's journey, or it keeps more of a focus. So
it's already a pretty complicated movie. It's already got a lot to pay attention to. Yeah. And so if you're able to sort of track his process or his progress toward the center of the mandala, or the chakra thing, I'd like I'd like to hear more about that. I don't know if I don't know if those two things map on top of each other. The mandala thing is just my only way to conceive of it, but it's a nice way to see the progress in a way, to have a proxy of what's going on with him at a deeper level in the anima figure as she changes as well. Because as you mentioned, she's flitting back and forth. You want to do this? You want to do that? I made this. What do you think about this? Look at my clothes. And then she becomes more stable as he has this dawning realization. In a sense, he's starting to embrace his fate. He's starting to awaken into authentic being. And as he awakens into authentic being, she becomes more stable. She becomes more tangible. She becomes someone who can actually move around in the world and go anywhere that she likes. So there is a sort of parallel which gives us, I think it would be too complicated if there were a male and a female figure there, because it gives us a very nice, simple proxy to look at, to see sort of, to gauge where we are along his path. And so I think for that reason, they I didn't know that, but for that reason, I think they made the right choice, because making it male female could have been interesting, but I think they would have lost a lot of people with that device, because it would have been a little too confusing or muddled.
Yeah, I think they're trying to keep it what maybe the most. It's already a movie that probably a lot of people are going to be disappointed by, because it's not laser guns and rockets and stuff.
There are a couple laser blasts though.
Yeah. There's a little bit of action, some stuff, but it's more of like a think piece. So I think they use sort of the standard archetypes for simplicity, because to try to tell a complex story, kind of like Avatar, they've got a really simple stories because you're going to be blown away by all the visuals. So something like that. You're just trying to keep it simple.
Yep. No. Yeah. It's sort of don't multiply complexity if it doesn't need to be multiplied, because we've already got a lot of motifs happening here. More than I can handle.
Want to talk about too.
Crap. Well, was there anything you wanted to talk about next? I mean, I have just sort of my things that I have listed out to go through or ask about, but I'm happy to talk about something you want to talk about. The next thing I was going to mention is the nothing is real stuff, but take it away.
Go for it, because the two things that I want to talk about that I know I want to go into are the Navajo twin story about where the two came to their father, the pollen path, and the chakra system. Because I haven't seen anybody. I mean, maybe it's out there on the internet. The internet's huge, but I haven't seen anybody mention it, and I've been dying to
maybe
bring that stuff up.
Do you feel that it's a relevant place to talk about that, or do you think it would make more sense to pull things together toward the end of the story? Because I don't know what it is. So I think wrapping it up
towards the end, especially the chakra overlay, I think that's something to do at the end. So, okay. There's another theme. It kind of ties into the role of Wallace and the idea of slavery and rebellion, which also ties into self-individuation. So when you break away from your person, when you're coming into your own, when you're going through the individuation process that Jung would talk about, coming to the center of the mandala and going through the whole Kundalini chakra system. This
teasing that chakra system pretty hard, Matt. It's building up a lot of anticipation for me. I'm really.
It's cool, man. It's so cool. So
it better be so cool.
So some other themes: the idea of ownership, slavery, hierarchy, individuation, becoming a creative person, becoming an individual. A couple of other. So just on the theme of slavery, you've got the replicants are slaves. You've also got when Kay goes to the orphanage. That reminded me of, I don't know if that's supposed to be Treasure Island or Pinocchio, because
I wanted to bring up Pinocchio for sure.
Okay, yeah, and that'll tie into the end as well.
Cool.
So there's another case of somebody owning another person in the orphanage. The orphanage owner, he sells these kids to go work and all this kind of stuff. And in the screenplay, when Kay walks into the orphanage, he sees this. He's greeted by all those little, like the dirty kids, and as he's going from one, like the vestibule to the main chamber, he notices in the script this little girl who's playing with a doll made out of like crushed and plated Coke cans, which made me think of, oh, this little girl is almost instinctually making a doll and playing with it. And in this case, it's a metal doll, a doll made out of metal, kind of like a robot, kind of like a replicant. So it seems like, I don't know, maybe they're saying that our compulsion to ownership of other people, it's not, I think there's a significance even today to how much, if we just dominated, if a human individual dominated a bunch of machines, I don't think they would care as much as if they were dominating a bunch of human beings. Like they had domination over a thing that looked like them. I think that is probably a psychological thing that ties into the denial of death as well. Like if we dominate, we don't feel as accomplished or maybe even as human if we're not dominating another human being like us. So, anyway, it just in the script, it seems like they're making the point that this humans controlling other humans starts at an early age. It's something that is very, it's just innate to our nature that we have to deal with. So K he's sort of, okay. What does Joy eventually name K?
Joe.
Names him Joe. All right. You wrote this in your notes. I don't let me step on what you found if I'm going to say what you're going to say. But so K, what does he call his boss?
He calls her Madam.
Yeah, and what profession normally calls the female boss a Madam?
Well,
like if you have a,
that's a good question. I'm not sure. Spies,
prostitution.
Really? Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I was thinking of James Bond because he also calls someone in James Bond Madam. Yeah, fair enough.
Well, there's M.
He might be M. Yeah.
Okay.
But M is sometimes female, sometimes male, right?
Yeah. Monsieur, Mademoiselle. Yeah.
Anyway, so the Madam thing.
Yeah. So Joe calls his boss Madam, which kind of has a prostitution implication. And also, when I was in Belize, one of the people that was in the group I was with, his name was Joe, and we were talking to some of the people that live there. And this woman who was from the area, when Joe told her his name, she laughed at him, and he was like, "What? What's so funny?" He's like, "Your name." And he said, "Well, why is it funny?" Because Joe is a euphemism for a male prostitute. So I don't know if that applies across other cultures or if it's just a thing in Belize and maybe that specific part of Belize. But so Kay is sort of owned by Madam, Robin Wright's character.
Right. And
then I think Robin Wright is supposed to be a mirror of the leader of the rebellion, which is a woman, and she doesn't own the prostitutes, but she kind of commands the prostitutes, right?
Right.
So and then also Niander Wallace, he kind of commands love. So he owns love. Madam owns Kay, and then the rebellion leader, she owns the prostitutes. So that's a theme, another part of that ownership of other people running through the movie.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't think a lot about that, and I didn't pick up on the Madam thing. Then in what way do those three things interact? If Niander is the Madam of love, and for reference, love is kind of the movie bad guy, in the sense of being the one chasing people around and kind of the strongman figure for Niander Wallace. The police chief is Madam, who has an attraction to Kay. Yeah, because she implies that she wants to sleep with him at some point, but he doesn't pick up on it.
What happens if I finish that bottle?
Yeah, and then there are these prostitutes who, it's sort of like it's an underground movement it's part of a wider revolution to make replicants, or to revolt against the humans, and use this sort of birth as the catalyst.
It's like a slave revolt.
Slave revolt with the firstborn replicant as their leader, potentially, who has been sequestered away in this dome, which
and her birth indicates, so the replicants are being told, you're not human, you don't deserve to live. But the fact that replicants can give birth, that tells them, and they say this, like one of the prostitute character that links up with Kay, she says that makes us more human than human because they can give birth. And Kay says, things that are born have a soul. So we've got the savior figure in Anna Stelline. She's a sort of figurehead for a savior, and it's all of that is woven into sort of proving the replicants' humanity. So, which would compel compassion, which is what they have to fight for.
People who are watching this don't understand what if you haven't seen the movie. So Kay is driven by a memory, and his memory is a confirmation to him at first that he may be the firstborn replicant. He thinks it's him. It turns out that his memory was given to him by the firstborn replicant, who is Stelline, who is an immune-compromised memory creator. That's her job. She creates memory, and she lives in a dome, and whether or not she actually has a compromised immune system, she exists only in her creations, in a sense, because she has no physical presence in the world, because she can't leave her dome. And part of that is creating this thing, which turns out to be the thing which unites her with her father, and potentially the thing which catalyzes this revolution from inside of this, with no physical extension in the world, using her mind to cause all of this to happen, whether it's intentional or not. But then that's what Matt's talking about, just for reference.
Yeah. And so to pick up, because you mentioned it, I want to talk about it. So I wonder if Anna Stelline, the memory maker, so two connections to mythology. One is to the goddess Maya, who does three things. She projects illusions, obscures the truth, but then also reveals the truth. So that's what Anna is doing. She projects these illusions of memory, right? And then it functions as those three things. That there's a projection of an illusion which obscures the truth, but then because she planted this illusion in Kay's memory, that actually then revealed the truth of who he is and who she is. Right.
Yeah. And it's a catalyst. It's the key. It's the prime catalyst, whether it's intentional or not. The fourth thing is, I think she plays bass guitar in a metal band, but we don't need to.
Yeah. The other thing that she is, I think she's supposed to be a reference to Atropos, which is the Fates. Mm-hmm. There's Lachesis, Clotho, and I forgot the name of the other one, but they are spinsters. And well, maybe not spinsters, but I think it's considered a spinster. These three Fates function as weavers.
Right.
And
Weavers
so they weave life. Yeah, they weave fate together, and they have these tools. Like one has a stick with yarn on it, the other one has scissors, and I forgot what the other one has, but it all seems to fit with that. She has this device by which she weaves together a memory and an identity for other people. So I think they did that.
And then that ties into, fate and purpose for Kay is, for him, this memory which is pulling him forward along this thread, which he's pulled by it because it's real. It's the only real thing, right? And when he tells her about it, or when he shows her the memory, she starts to cry because it's hers, because it's real. And so her as the sort of weaver of fates is, I think, an interesting tie-in with the amor fati idea of once you sink your hooks into something that's real, even if it's right in front of you and an intuitive thing, and you don't know what the sort of telos of that is or where you're going or what the goal is, but you smell the genuineness of it, right? You smell the thread of fate, and it's not like anything around you.
And you feel it.
You feel it. Everything around you is fake, especially in this world where it's 99.99% fake. We're in Freud's dystopia in the extreme. So we've reached that. And so anything that comes in which smells of reality, which smells of life,
stinks of real life,
then it has to become a powerful force in the world. So it's almost like Kay has the option, it seems like, to go back or to move forward, and he moves forward, which is the sort of Nietzschean conception of the love of fate, of loving this thing because it is for you, because it is yours, and you take full ownership of it, even though it ultimately leads in you dying in a few days, but that doesn't matter. If I could do it again, I would do it exactly the same way because I love my fate. And there's something, and maybe we'll get into that when we talk about the twins thing, but there's something about that she's creating it and he's following it, and together they're sort of operating as a whole. And I think maybe you want to bring up the pollen thing, following the pollen path. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's such a cool story. So a question I had for you is, do you think that how much volition and how intentional do you think Anna, how much volition she had and how intentional she was in putting that memory into him? Because does the other replicants have that same memory? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think they really even hint at that one way or the other. So if it is that many have received it, then you would require an external trigger to activate it. And so that suggests that there are very few triggers, but finding a box under a dead tree is a pretty good one, especially when it ties so closely to that. So whether it is or not, whether it is or not, I think doesn't matter so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just like I thought it was a fun area to dive into, because let's say if you think of that memory as something, as a collective memory, as, a lot of people had the experience of, kind of having something precious and having to hide it away, which in the memory in the movie is Kay has this memory of growing up in an orphanage and being chased by these older boys because Kay has this toy. It's a toy horse, Trojan horse, and he goes and he hides it away so that the other boys can't get it, and he gets beaten up for it. So I think probably most people on the planet, I don't know, have some memory or feeling similar to that. And if not that one, the feeling or the idea that which that memory in the movie elicits from Kay is that there's a bigger purpose to my life. I'm real. I have this, I need to individuate. So it seems, I don't know, it seems like, okay, you could put that memory in tons of different people, in millions of people, but only one of them is going to encounter the thing that unlocks that memory in such a way that compels them to do a specific thing. So, right. I mean, think about anybody in their own life that has a story where, I became the person that I am because of the way I grew up, and then this encounter, which pushed me into this compelling, irresistible path that I'm now on, which has made me the person that I am.
It's like, and it kind of reminded me as a parallel of the way that biology works, right? So your DNA, you have a lot of DNA, and a lot of your DNA is shoved into the background where it's pretty much junk information, and it's just sort of sitting there along this double helix as one sort of thing that then selectively, as a species evolves, decides what to code into proteins, right? So there's this creative, almost like a creative decision that nature is making through the process of evolution to say, at this stage, we need to code these things into proteins and build a body, because this body is what will get this particular evolutionary path, or what will allow us to move down this evolutionary path that will allow for a continuation of life, because that's the telos of everything. That's the telos of nature is to continue life, right? So she is sitting in this dome. She is DNA. And they're together. I think the double helix thing is interesting as well, because there's two that are required to be one. Choosing selectively what to code into proteins, he is the thing that's coded into proteins. He's the thing that has to exist in the world as the expendable to bring the next iteration of life. If you look at, and I probably have talked about this before, but if you were to imagine genes as two giant creatures on the landscape battling with each other over millions of years, blue-eye genes versus brown-eye genes fighting like rock'em sock'em robots, they're just cycling through bodies. So Kay is one of the bodies that are needed, and it's almost like whether she's doing it intentionally or not, she's the ephemeral side of that. She's the gene side of that. She's the one that doesn't have to physically exist in order to make the next iteration happen. And I think that's particularly interesting. But also on the biological side, there is the relationship between your genetic disposition and your environment. So that if you have a disposition and you encounter certain things with these specific traits genetically, then something will happen. This will happen. But someone else might encounter that same thing in the environment, and that won't happen because they don't have the disposition. So it's this relationship between the genetic and the environmental that leads to the outcome. And I think that then Kay and her are sort of playing that game back and forth, where it's this relationship between the environment and the informational, or the environment and the meme, the physical and the non-physical, in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, as you were saying that, it's something I hadn't thought of, but I wonder if Kay is the kind of like he is the means by which creativity will come back into the world. You'll get new life, because he is sort of she has
a useful mutation.
Yeah, kind of like a useful mutation that in the end will unite the father with the daughter. And I've been trying to figure that one out, but I think that unification, kind of the end of the movie, is indicative of her being released from her cage. So creativity and new life has been caged up by Niander Wallace. And
yes,
the end result of the film, we can infer that that's what happens, is because she planted that illusion in him. He is the aberration or the mutation that will break the ossified cycle, which is tyranny, slavery, and that kind of thing. So she'll be broke because, yes, yeah. And so you'll get a rejuvenation of culture because she will be freed to spark that rebellion, and you'll get like new humanity, new ideas, and all that kind of stuff.
But I think the essential part of it is to not just consider her to be the one in the prison, but to consider both her and Deckard to be in their respective prisons. Deckard is in the cultural prison, and maybe, well, we could say the cultural prison, and his daughter is in the maybe creative source of life prison or something like that, because he lives in something like Vegas, or he lives in Sin City, but it's a dead Sin City. He's surrounded by these giant statues of naked women and these projections of crooners from the 40s and 50s and gambling and alcohol, but it's all dead. And he's locked there, surrounded by a field of radiation that protects him, so he's safe. He's perfectly safe, but because he's safe, he's also inert. And the inertness is part of the ossification, part of the cage of Neander Wallace, of the one who maybe knows that these creative forces have a disproportionate potential. Two individuals have a disproportionate potential to disrupt everything. And
disrupt him specifically,
but disrupt,
he's the tyrant.
Disrupt tyranny in general, disrupt this equilibrium where the pendulum has swung to one side and he's grabbed hold of the pendulum and is not letting it swing back. It has to swing back eventually, but he's desperately holding on to the pendulum at one end of the swing, the pendulum of this outrageous superficial culture gone wrong, of this extension into the stars as an immortality project, as this living completely in ego, as opposed to having a sort of total self, and accepting a little chaos, accepting that chaos brings life. And so he's
disconnected. He's disconnected from the rest of humanity.
Yes.
He only interacts with he goes out. No, he doesn't go out. He's just there.
He's in. Yeah, he has chaotic potential, but he's inert. And she has chaotic potential, but she's inert. But they're caged in slightly different ways. He's caged in the sort of Sin City culture version of that extreme, and she's caged in the more technological, maybe creative side of that. And then they need a variable. They need an expendable body to act as the catalyst for... I meant
Wallace he's the tyrant that is... you were talking about the pendulum swinging, and Wallace has grabbed hold of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like the tyrant who he just never interacts with people. He's always, I mean, think of anyone in a position of power that has such a tyrannical hold on the people below them that it's a tyranny, and the people below, they can't get out of it. They're in a wasteland. They're impotent, and they're quashed and quelled, and they can't be creative. They can't find life. So and part of that is, if those people could get a hold of the person making their lives like that, they wouldn't stand for it. They would be like, no, this isn't. But there's this disconnect and this inability for confrontation.
Right. Yes, everything has to be in its own bubble and isolated, but there's a sense of these sort of separate vessels sitting apart. In a sense, each one of them inert. Let's say Neander too, because he's at the top of this tyranny, so he can't move around very much either. And how long can this stasis really continue? It requires eventually something is going to smash it. There's going to be this loose variable that flies in like a little butterfly and starts just collapsing everything, and it's inevitable. But this is the story of that, but also the story of his individuation.
Yeah, to that effect. So even it's kind of like True Detective. The setting of this world, LA, is beneath the water level. So around LA, where the story mostly takes place, you've got these huge retainer walls that are keeping at bay the ocean. So you've got this chaotic civilization, this tyrannical civilization, this wasteland being threatened by the ocean. And the ocean is, I don't know, maybe all the time, it's always a symbol of the chaotic, of new life. And so they have to go through all this effort to build these huge walls to keep the threat of chaos at bay. So just another visual motif of feeling threatened by order, feeling threatened by chaos.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's another one that sets the tone for the entire movie. and the movement toward not chaos, but the movement toward the creative or life, because you constantly see that life is right there outside of the wall. And if one thing goes wrong in that wall, if one little bolt or nut breaks, then the entire thing is going to crash in, and that's going to destroy, but that destruction is going to then rejuvenate. And that's a really great visual to constantly be reminded of. And he's always flying by the wall, and you see the line between chaos and order, the structure, the buildings, straight lines, and this just scary, dark abyss of water, which is it's great.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
We're about halfway through the film.
I think so. Well, do you want to bring up anything else about the realness thing? I mean, we did talk about it pretty well, but what is? I mean, so there are these constant references to it, right? I accidentally said that Neander said it, but yeah, Deckard says that he knows what's real. Then you have Madame saying that people just want something that seems real. There's this constant reminder of nothing is real, and then a sense of when he's dying on the steps at the end, somehow that's the thing that's real, or finally that is real. I don't know if you wanted to, if we touched on that enough, or if you wanted to talk about it a little more.
A couple of things we can maybe bring up now that might come up later. So she says when she goes to his apartment, when Madam Robin Wright, when she goes to Kay's apartment, she says, "We're all just looking for something real."
Yeah.
So that's that. Harrison Ford says, "I know what's real," and Badger, the guy who appraises stuff, he says, "This is a real wooden horse you've got here, or real wood." There's that, and at so one of the prostitute that kind of takes Kay under her wing or cares for Kay. I think she like, we're supposed to think that she cares for him, like she loves him or has an affection for him. Seriously, she says, hang on, I wrote it down. Or no, the rebellion leader, she says that dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do. Yeah. So again, that reality thing. And like Mircea Eliade is always talking about the idea of, we perform rituals and we do the same things over and over again because we feel that there's power in it. It feels real and effectual. And so when we do things that we're not sure about, it's like, I don't know if this is really going to work. Right. So that is definitely a theme carried through the film. Yeah. That's something that flew by me, but now that you mentioned it, it's like, oh yeah, that's there.
Yeah. And something about that quote or what she says about dying as the most real thing, and what exactly does she say? What is the exact? Do you remember the exact quote?
Yeah, I think that's it. Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
Most human thing we can do. So then, when he dies at the end, I mean, he to me is like he's the body that's been coded by the gene that is expendable, but fundamental to the carrying out of the telos of nature, which is to continue life, right? So, so he dies with a peaceful expression on his face, and his death is preferable to living 150 years. Not that he would have, but living 150 years, being a Blade Runner, just running around retiring people. There's no inherent good to a duration. There's no inherent good to living 100 years or living 20 years. It's about whether or not you've been authentic to yourself and whether or not you've done something that is a mountain that you feel is worth climbing, right? Yeah. And so that's why I think at the end when he dies with that expression on his face, there's no other way for that to turn out, and it's sort of a reminder of the necessity to not place an emphasis on how long is my life going to be? How can I make myself more comfortable? What can I do that other people are doing that might make me happier? Because that's not where it is. You'll never get there. You'll always be approaching it and never arrive at a sense of authentic being or at a sense of fulfillment. But if you catch hold of the fate, the thread, the genuine, the intuition about where you should be, the bleeps from the self that are telling you how to find equilibrium, if you immediately follow those things from moment to moment, then duration is irrelevant, then how many computers you have is irrelevant, and I mean, you may have tons of stuff or you may not, but that won't be the defining variable. It'll be your ability to find in the authentic purpose and meaning and follow it constantly, which I think is hard to do. But a good example is Kay just immediately doing exactly what he feels he should do next without hesitation. And he doesn't really have much hesitation, although he has moments of crisis, but it doesn't seem like he's ever deciding he shouldn't follow his next intuition.
Yeah, and I think that in the movie that string of action of him following his gut or following what is compelling and real, I think it's intrinsically tied to identity. And so he's always trying to find his identity. Then he finally does, and it's not what he thought it was. And then he finds satisfaction in losing his identity, laying down his life for somebody else.
Right.
So it seems like that it's because I think the way we're talking about it, it seems like I think the message of the movie could get lost in thinking, well, it would lead most people to think, oh, well, I can just kind of stay in my cordoned off space and just do this thing, and I don't need other people. But I think the message of the movie is you need other people around and because if you just keep your own identity sequestered from everybody else and you're only going after your own goals and don't take into account how that affects others and the feedback you get from others, then that's not what the movie is saying. It's not saying carry on with that. It's saying, I think the idea is you find your own joy, happiness, and your own identity in others and the good of others as well. Because that seems to be ultimately what satisfies Kay when he is not so concerned about himself anymore. He's concerned about things outside of himself. Then he's really satisfied.
But I don't. Well, I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I kind of disagree in a sense. I think it's not about the others, but is often the others. There's some. You said, I think you used the word surrender. There's something about surrender, but not that surrender couldn't take on many different forms, because surrender might be locking yourself up in a tower and writing letters to God that then are published. Maybe that's surrender.
Sure.
Right. So I think focusing on, okay, you have to, yes, often I think that takes the form of sacrifice, surrender of self for the sake of something greater for others. But I think there are a lot of different potential manifestations of that broader message, that broader idea, which doesn't necessarily have this sort of the interaction with people or the connection to others.
Yeah, and I wouldn't confine that idea of surrender to meaning, oh, I'm going to go just become a doormat for people, or that I have to actually.
I hope that's not what it is.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I don't think it necessarily has to mean that you just are never in your house and never alone. You're always around people. But something you said was the monk who secludes himself and writes letters to God to then be published. Well, if they're published, like, what does that mean? That means other people are going to read it. That the thing you do is going to then be a benefit to, or it's going to have contact with other people. And so it's going to, like, it's not just the individual isolated from everybody else.
unless you're writing literature for like squirrels or something. I mean, the reason I'm pushing back on it is I don't disagree with you, and I think the way that manifests itself is often in relation to others, but I push back against it because I don't think that you put by focusing on that, I don't think you put your finger on the crux of it. I think you put your finger on the thing that's immediately adjacent to it. I think the crux of it is finding the authentic and following that, whatever that happens to be. And you could describe 100 different versions of it, but it's sort of Kantian object that exists by itself without description. A thing in itself is the authentic, whatever that is. But if I describe it, I'm immediately doing a lesser thing than it, because the thing in itself would manifest differently for different people. And who's to say that writing a series of graphic novels for squirrels isn't that? I don't know that it isn't, right? So I'm just saying, yes, in 90% of the cases or 99% of the cases, that's right. But as soon as you describe something, then you prescribe something. And if you prescribe something, then people tend to jump on the prescription rather than focusing on the object, which is a thing in itself that can't be fully known, but is best accessed by each individual sort of intuitively, if that makes sense. That's my sort of slight delineation.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, that's definitely, I feel that. That's worth thinking about. Is that the thing where I think Kant says the best things can't be described, the next best?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what the quote is?
I don't remember. I don't remember the whole quote, but that's what I mean. That is what he's talking about. When he talks about well, the kingdom of ends, when he talks about what a good will is, the categorical imperative, he's trying to use these different ways to get at something which is fundamentally not describable by anecdote. That if you were to try to get at it through anecdote, you would be approaching it but never reaching it. So I mean, he describes in like his moral system what is the good. To him, that's the categorical imperative. He's describing a thing in itself that is never perfectly represented by any action, by any example that you could give of what is a good thing. And so he would try to shy away from that. He tries to avoid giving anecdotes for that reason. Well, maybe we can get into. Do you have something else to talk about on that? Did you find the quote?
Yeah, I almost did.
Almost.
But yeah, almost. So no. The answer is no. But it's that thing, like the best things can't be described. The second best will get wrong, and then man, it's so good.
I know what you're talking about. I have seen the quote, but I can't faithfully restate it. The best things can't.
We have, and we've got the internet right here. We can just cut out the dead air.
Right here, dead air. Dead air. A stack of waffles. A stack of waffles filling dead air. No, I can't find it.
That's fine.
Yeah, but the gist of it is something like
what you just said.
Yeah. I won't restate it.
All that stuff.
Anecdote approaches but not reach. Anecdote approaches but never reaches the thing in itself.
Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, okay. I think we said some stuff there.
I'll give us a 79 out of 100 on that.
Yeah, I'll do better. Well, so do you want to? I mean, we're kind of at the midpoint of the movie. Do you want to talk about? I mean, I think this might be a good place to bring in the Navajo twin story, because we're about to get to the part where.
Oddly enough, that's right where I was on my questions, right on the twins.
Oh yeah, let's do it. All right. Did you figure this stuff out? Did you see it for yourself, or?
I wasn't thinking of the Navajo twins, but I remember that story from, I think I read it both in Campbell, and I think I also read it in Jung. I think I've read it in two different places. I think Jung mentions it in Symbols of Transformation, or it might be in something else, but I think I've seen it in two different places. So I'm familiar with the story, but I wasn't thinking specifically of that. But I'm aware of the sort of the archetypal twins and what they represent.
Yeah.
And my mind went to the double helix thing, but I mean generally it's the pair that represents the whole, right? And each sort of each being a necessary, potentially opposite, but a necessary in order to have a union of opposites that is a whole thing by itself, is my understanding, which might be something like a Hegelian synthesis, in a way. I don't know. What do you want to talk about the Navajo twins?
All right.
All right.
This is, so when I saw Blade Runner for the first time, and I saw Kay walking through that radioactive field to go chase after Harrison Ford's character, I was like, oh my God, this guy put the Navajo, where the two came to their father's story and the pollen path in a movie. And I was like, I can't believe you did this. And then I thought,
is that real? I can't believe you did this, or is that a joyful, I can't believe you did this?
Oh, totally joyful, because it's crazy that the way he applied it and actually made it come to fruition. Okay, so in the Navajo story about where the two came to their father, you've got these two brothers. I think they're brothers. I don't think they might be twins, but I think they're, okay, I'll just say they're twins because it works for the movie too. So you got these twins, and they've grown up with their mother, and they don't know who their father is. And they're asking their mother, well, who's our dad? Who's our dad? And she says, oh, well, your dad is a son. You better not go after him. But they decide to go out looking for their father. All right. So they go off looking for their father, and they're headed, I can't remember if it was east or west, but they're headed towards the sun. And along the way, I can't remember if they're told this by the Spider Woman, but they meet some helpers along the way who gives them some tools so that when they actually meet their father, they can withstand the test. All right. So they're told that, you know, if your father is a son, he's going to fight you. He's going to test you to make sure that you can withstand his conflict or his action or his wrath, which will actually prove that you are his sons, his offspring, his progeny. All right. So the names of the twins are, one is named Born of Water, and the other one is named Monster Slayer. All right. So we learned that Kay and Anna, they're the twins. They're the twins in the movie. All right. Anna was born of a woman. She was born of water. And Kay is the one going out and kicking ass. He's the Monster Slayer. Right. So that seems to fit
very well.
And then, yeah. And so Kay is on his way to meet the father. Okay. So is Harrison Ford then a sun god? Answer is yes. All right. In the script, when we meet Anna for the first time, she's playing with that device and she's creating the scene. And she creates this little bug on a leaf. And in the screenplay, it says that the last form that the bug takes is that of a scarab beetle. All right. So scarab beetle is supposed to signify, this doesn't happen in the movie.
Egyptian
it's just
sun
a
god,
bug. Yeah, the Egyptian sun god Re, or Ray. Well, I don't know how to say it.
I thought it was Ra, but okay.
I saw it R-E, but aren't they all well, maybe they're not all the same, but aren't they maybe just different spellings because there were variations? I don't know. But anyway, sun god.
Yeah, prior to the disc version, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I got to read up on that.
Akhenaten is the one who who depersonalized it and got rid of all the specific imagery. Just said it's the disc itself, and I'm the prophet. And the scarab, I think, was the prior manifestation, or one of the symbols.
Okay,
I think. Yeah.
So she makes a scarab beetle, which, and then Kay, after that scene, goes to a bombed out, irradiated Las Vegas, which they say that dirty bombs or nuclear bombs have something times the power of the sun. So Harrison Ford is living in the middle of the power of the sun.
Right.
And when we see it, it's kind of the color of the sun, like this golden yellow sunset thing, right? Which is also kind of the color of pollen. So in the Navajo story, when you're on the right path, when you're doing the right thing, you are on the pollen path because everything around you is golden. Everything's as though it is covered in pollen. All right. So as Kay is walking towards, as he's walking through Las Vegas on his way to meet Harrison Ford's character, what does he encounter? Do you remember?
Bees.
A beehive. Yeah. All right. So in the story, one of the admonitions that the brothers are given is, coat your feet and cover your hands with pollen, and that will be a protection. So we see Kay walking through it, and obviously his feet are covered with pollen.
Right.
And then he sticks his hand into the beehive, I think to sort of signify that now his hand is covered in pollen. So he has
what else could
protection
it possibly be? Because when you first watch it, you think, why? Why though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
that's great.
Maybe they threw that in there to tell the people that are clued into Denis Villeneuve's mythology obsession that that's what it is. And so then when Kay gets to the casino, there's a couple of things inside the casino. When he's in there, there's a couple of carved heads on the wall, and I think one of those is supposed to be Hermes, and Hermes is a signifier of initiation and knowledge. And then I don't know, maybe there's another carved head on the wall, and I wonder if that's Dionysius, but
I didn't catch that. I think on another viewing, I might have picked that up.
Okay. So in the Navajo story, when the two come to their father, they're tested, they're fought. They have to fight their dad, and so what happens in there? Kay fights Harrison Ford.
Wow.
And then Harrison Ford, he says, well, we could keep at this or we could get a drink. And so then he accepts, he doesn't call him his son, but he accepts him. He passes the test as though you're worthy to have a chat.
That overlaps so well. That is fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I didn't pick up on that. When I was watching that part.
Can I say one more thing?
Please,
before?
Go ahead.
In the Navajo story, the point of it is that, as with all of these movies and stories where somebody's looking for their dad, it's an idea. It's the hunt for your own identity. Like, who am I? Who are my parents? Where did I come from? Kind of thing. And
Pinocchio.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, I had Jordan Peterson screaming in my ear in the back of my mind because I just remembered watching a lecture that he had given about descending into the abyss to rescue your father. Pinocchio then finding his identity and becoming a real boy, and also as a result of that becoming an initiator of creation. Because only when you rescue your father, who represents culture in a sense, or is locked inside culture and can't escape, only when you rescue your father can you sort of summon the powers within yourself to create the new and to reach or attain a higher level. In this case, maybe of individuation, of being a real boy in the sense of meeting fate or fulfilling your destiny or reaching the center of the mandala, or maybe something about chakras, or being the agent of change in culture, right? Breaking the tyranny. And so I remembered that lecture from Jordan Peterson that I'd seen a long time ago, and it came up as I was watching this, and I sort of it felt like I didn't pick up on the pollen thing. I mean, I'd heard that story, but I didn't pick up on that. So that's great. But he also is not just he ultimately rescues his father. In that sense, it's not really his father, but he thinks it is, so it operates as his father. And the act of rescuing does bring about the rejuvenation and does sort of break the status quo. So I think
we
that
infer it,
yeah, well, because he reunites the father and the daughter ultimately, and gives up his life to do it. So I think that, I mean, maybe that wasn't intentional, but that motif I think is still very much there. Although, I mean, the twins are not rescuing their father, right? They're what are they getting out of that?
I think they get their identity. Oh, we are sons of the Father, which is kind of, I mean, it's kind of like Jesus saying, "I and my Father are one." You have this identity with full consciousness. So the Son represents full consciousness, and there's no, it's like, nirvana, getting beyond the cycle of samsara and mere death and life kind of thing. I think they get some powers, maybe.
That's sick.
I think, yeah, I think, excuse me. I think they get some powers to come back and then sort of minister to the rest of the world. I think that's what happens.
Just a quick point. I wanted to
fight some monsters. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, because you talked about Hermes, and it reminded me another thing that I noticed, or I realized, is that we have interesting levels. So there's the psychic level for the unconscious level for Kay or Joe. There's the Earth level, the battle happening on Earth between life and order, and then there's the cosmic level of reaching into the stars and constantly reaching for the next thing. And when you said Hermes, I remembered the line, the Hermes Trismegistus line, "as above, so below," and that stuck out to me because it's kind of a parallel at all three levels: the cosmic, on Earth, and psychically, the same kind of thing happening, mirroring. As above, you could say cosmically, so below. As above, on the Earth, this battle between Wallace and maybe Deckard, or Deckard and his progeny, and then within Kay.
Yeah, and another thing to reinforce the kingship or kind of deity idea for Deckard is when Kay is fighting Deckard, he's fighting him while Elvis is playing in the background. Right? What was Elvis called? Do you remember his kind of nickname?
The Banana?
The King. Oh. And in this scene he's resurrected. Like he's resurrected via technology. So we've got this resurrection of the king, and Harrison Ford is a king, so he's kind of being resurrected, or in a sense, kind of like the Pinocchio connection, being rescued in a sense.
Yes, but in this case, the rescuing, or the attempt to rescue, is at first his identity, and then becomes sort of manifest when he realizes that his identity is not the thing that was being rescued. So at first, he thinks he's finding himself, and he thinks that his memory has led him toward knowing that he is this destined child. But in fact, what he realizes is that actually, no, that's just one of the lily pads along the way. And in fact, I have to surrender myself, and so I have to actually physically save my father in the ocean against this sort of agent of the other god, and rescue my father physically so that he can be reunited with his daughter and bring about this change. So it kind of, in a way, it happens twice. It happens in his intention, and it happens in actuality.
Did I say that Kay was getting resurrected? I meant to say Harrison Ford because he's the king. He's like the Elvis thing is just a
No,
cheeky nod,
you
I
said
think,
that.
to resurrect. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. And I knew,
Um,
yeah, I never knew he was called the king. I thought that Elvis was, his nickname was the banana, but I've been wrong my whole life, and that's too bad.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. My parents taught me bad.
They taught you banana. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I did list a couple of juxtapositions. We kind of covered some of these, but I just in case, I'm just gonna say these, and if any of these pop out, let me know if you have anything to say about them. Okay. These are versus statements. Okay. Staying on Earth versus going off world. The pristine of Wallace versus junk heaps. Clear sight, K being able to read things very quickly and see information quickly versus blindness. Love versus Joe. So you have a Deckard versus Wallace, and then a Love versus Joe dynamic, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And broader human versus replicant. So I don't know if any of those pop out at you. These are just sort of pairs that I
thought we covered some of that because like not the clean versus the chaos, so order versus chaos, you get that kind of thing. And then I thought love was supposed to be so love is like the mirror or the twin of Kay. She's like she's the and also I think those two are supposed to mirror Deckard and Rachel from the original movie, because when Love takes Kay down into the archives and they watch or they listen to the audio of the first meeting between Deckard and Rachel, Kay remarks she likes him. She's like, "What do you mean?" or something like that. And he says, "Well, she's trying to provoke him." And then right after that, the exchange between Love is then trying to express interest in Kay, but Kay kind of brushes it aside. So that's supposed to tell us that they are the foil of each other. Mm-hmm. And then Wallace and Deckard, obviously, I think. And then the. Do
you want to talk about that foil though between Love and Joe? What is the force of that? I mean, you have these. She helps him at first, but you have these two. One is sort of living out his fate, and the other it represents the strong arm of the tyranny. And then finally at the end, you have a confrontation in the sea, ending in suffocation, ending in one being suffocated to death or drowning. Is there potentially a brother-sister thing going on there, or is that something else? I haven't really thought too much about that pair. I mean, it's clearly there's something there, but I haven't really thought a lot about it.
It seems like I mean that to me, the first thing that comes to mind, I mean, from the little that I've read about, from the wealth of information on all this stuff, is that the warring brother Cain Abel kind of motif is there, and it's not necessarily that it has to be. I don't think it has to be necessarily male female or. Obviously, they're not really related by blood in the movie, but they're just an equal pair, like equals that fight against each other as opposites. And she's always really, really well kempt and super classy. And then Kay is always kind of. He's not schlubby, but he's just always kind of dirty. So they're foils for each other.
Well, no doubt.
I think that's
no doubt. Yeah, I'll have to reflect on that further, because I wonder if there is something a little bigger going on, but I wasn't able to pick it up. I mean, the confrontation at the end in the sea. I think it's interesting. Again, this is something I wish I'd thought about more, but everyone is about to drown or die by suffocation at the end. They're in the ocean, so they finally are on the other side of the wall. The wall protects civilization from destruction, the sea crashing in. Then at the end, in this fight, you have the god, the father, who's in his seatbelt, kind of strapped in, trying to grasp for air. He's about to die by drowning. And then she does die by drowning, and he almost does as well, but then Deckard saves him. So it's almost like it's the first time I watched it, I was very confused when I watched it in the theater. I was very underwhelmed by the scene. I thought it was weird and awkward, but watching it this time, it seems like there's something more going on.
Pinocchio,
metaphorically, Pinocchio perhaps, but just the suffocation motif or the drowning motif, I don't know, something to think more about, but I haven't really come to anything concrete there. I don't know if you have.
The suffocation stuff didn't really stick out to me, but definitely the Pinocchio connection. Again, what you were talking about with the rescuing of the father from the belly of the whale. I mean, the
ship is the whale.
Yeah. The little car is the whale in which he's stuck and has to be rescued.
A tiny little whale.
Yeah, the service vehicle.
Yeah. Well, I guess something for people to think about. We haven't really come to any big ideas there, but
I got nothing.
You do have something. I think maybe it's time to talk about your. I don't know why you're nodding and you look happy about this, but I'm quite curious to hear more about your chakra idea and how this and why you want to talk about it last. Please just say things about it.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about it last because to make the idea clear, you kind of have to go back through the whole story. And if I just said each of the chakras when they happen, I mean, it would be so disconnected that it makes sense, but it's just a more cohesive presentation to just say it all. All right. So in Kundalini Yoga, you have 7 chakras, and the first chakra starts between your butthole and your genitals, right? And it's called the Muladhara, and it progresses all the way up to nirvana and actually exiting the body at Sasrara, or I don't know how to pronounce.
Yeah, you
the
said
last
it
one.
Exactly right. That's correct.
Really? Okay.
No, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
I have no idea.
Thanks, Dad. Okay. So let's go through them because it's totally cool. All right. So Muladhara, at that level, it's between your genitals and your butthole, and at that point in the yogic system, the Kundalini yogic system, you're basically just holding everything together. All right. So when we meet Kay, this is where he is. His whole journey is this whole Kundalini system. So when we first meet him, he's holding everything together, right? He's just fought Sapper Morton, and he goes back to base to take his baseline test.
Yep.
So, and he's right there. He's got to be really rigid, not show any emotion, and just keep it all together. And like, even when he's walking through the police station, the guy says like, "Fucking skin job," and he's just like, he's not showing any emotion. He's just keeping it all together. All right. Another thing to mention that I think points to that's what this movie's about is at that station. That station is characterized by the element of earth. All right. And in that kind of series of shots and scenes, we start off on a farm. That's pretty earthy, right?
If you say so. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I say it's pretty earthy.
All right.
And so, all right. So that's that part of it. And then in the next station is the station of the genitals, and that's Svadhisthana. And so in the next scene in the movie, that's when we meet Joy. She is the sexual companion, the sexual object, just like the anima talks about. And that station is characterized by water. And it seems like there's a preponderance of water in that scene because she actually, like you mentioned, when Kay gives her the emanator, they go up on the roof in the rain, and she actually is, touching water. She's interacting with water or responding to water. So there's that.
An emergence from limitation into possibility as well.
Right. Yeah. She's mobile now. And so the next station is the stomach chakra, which is Manipura. And at that station, this is when Kay goes to the orphanage, because this is the furnace scene. So Manipura is in the stomach. The stomach is the furnace. It's also, if you look at that scene, we've got a bunch of pipe work and stuff, which is also symbolic of intestines, which is symbolic of the labyrinth and the mandala, the innards, like the inside of the psyche and all that kind of stuff. So we've got the furnace. We've also got fire from above when the attackers are being destroyed by love. It's also violence and power and conquering. All right, so there's that scene. And then the next chakra in the next scene we have is the Anahata, which is when Kay encounters Anna. All right, so that's the heart chakra. Mm-hmm. It's also indicative of the lingam yoni, and the lingam yoni is like a visual representation of the generative powers of the universe. It's a female genitalia and male genitalia interacting or in union. All right. So in that scene, we have Kay basically coming into union with his opposite. Mm-hmm. And that's when things kind of shift. I mean, that's when his composure totally breaks. There's an apocalypse and he screams, "God damn it," when he comes to the realization that he's real. He's not this replicant he's been told he's been his entire life.
Right.
Yeah. All right. And so then the last two are the last three are a little bit shaky, but in the Kundalini yoga system, you've got the first three sort of chakras, and then you've got the heart chakra, and then the last three chakras are actually a mirror of the first three. Mm-hmm. All right. So the next one that we encounter is going to be the chakra Visuddha, which it's in the larynx. And by the way, I got all this from this book, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space by Joseph Campbell.
It's in my wish list, but I haven't got to it yet.
Well, now you don't have to read it because I'm explaining it all to you.
God damn it!
Yeah, but so when I saw the movie, I was thinking, oh, this sounds just like that book that I read about the same thing, because you've got the pollen path and the Kundalini thing in there. So anyway, the fifth space in the chakra system is the larynx, and that's when we have that's your speech is your power. You're gaining knowledge. And Kay, in that scene, he has this big discussion and a slew of revelations with the Father, right?
Yeah, not many discussions though. They kind of talk a little bit, and then they just hang out together for a little while. It's a bit of a anticlimactic meeting, but that's interesting. I mean, that's not what you'd expect.
Yeah,
it's just a being together. It's a being together rather than in a movie you would expect to have all the details revealed in this conversation where they get it all out and they hash it out, and all is revealed. That's the standard movie structure, is the explainer that makes all the pieces fit together. You get it a little bit, but it's more about the them being together rather than the details of the plot playing out or understanding something on a sort of intellectual level. To me, it seems more like a catharsis for them, just being in the same place together.
Yeah, and I mean, he goes there with the purpose of interrogation. I mean, he says, "I want to ask you a few questions," and that's. Yes. I mean, all of that is verbiage about speech and information exchange and that kind of thing. So that's why I think that might be the...
Potentially.
And then in the scene after the fight, and he goes through his sort of... I thought it might have been a little bit of a shamanic journey, but Kay gets gets his ass kicked, and then he gets he's taken care of by the people in the rebellion, and he gets more of a revelation there about his identity. And I think that scene and the one right after that are the sixth station in the chakra system, which is the ajna. It's right between the eyes. That's when he gets the absolute truth of his identity. He's like, no, I'm not born of water. I'm actually a replicant. I'm just like anybody else. I'm not special. And Campbell also says that is the station which you get a vision of the goddess. And so in that same scene, he walks outside and he sees that huge projection of joy, which is his goddess.
Yes.
And so I thought that seemed to overlay pretty well. And then the last one is Sahasrara, which is exiting the body, letting go. And that's the end of the movie when he dies on the steps.
Well, I think it works pretty well. I wonder if the scene where he encounters joy in this sort of gigantic form is yeah, that makes sense actually, now that I think about it. I was wondering why is that there, and I didn't really understand it, and your explanation makes a lot of sense. I can't find another possible explanation for why that would be, other than my general sense was a feeling of closure and an acceptance of fate. Sort of a broader sense of, now I realize I'm not special, and this was, look, there she is. She's kind of everywhere. Everyone can buy her.
Yeah.
I'm nobody. I'm just one piece in this whole thing, and I'm kind of getting ready to now give up the identity that I thought I was discovering for something higher. That was my sort of understanding of that, but that's a pretty fuzzy idea, not specific to her. So I like the chakra idea. That's pretty cool.
So maybe this would help to. Sorry, man, I'm chomping at the bit to explain this because it's so. I think it's so neat. But so to maybe add some validity to that. So I mentioned that the top three stations in the chakra system are a mirror and kind of an opposite of the first three chakras. Mm-hmm. And so at the ajna, which is when he meets the goddess, when he meets joy, and the ajna is the eye, or the chakra between the eyes, he has the vision of the goddess, and she's not that's when he's kind of he realizes that, oh, I'm just one Joe amongst many. There's nothing special about me. And it's kind of an inversion of the Svadhisthana, which is the genital region. So like the genital region, you are trying to gain. It's more of a trying to like sexual conquering, reproduction, that kind of thing. But then the ajna is the opposite of that. It's not a conquering; it's a letting go. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a mirror. It's in both of those stations, they're tied to joy, and sort of either gaining joy or letting go of joy, which coincides with letting go and gaining his true identity and coming to terms with that. So
she stands up and turns away from him as though, to say, you're not different from the other person. If another person were to walk by right now, I would do the same thing because I have a relationship with them too. This is just part of a machine. And when I was telling you before that your name is Joe, when I was telling you that you're special before, I do that for everybody. Yeah. You programmed me. You're the one who set the sliders to make me do that. So this is not you with a fate like the sister. This is you with a fate like
everybody else.
A gene robot. You're just a cog, but that's your fate, and whether or not you accept it, he accepts it, and that is a lesson that Becker would really like, I think, because we in some way find, through surrender to whatever it happens to be, we start to find peace in death. And that's what he accomplishes. Yeah, you're not special. So Nobody is.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it, man. That was the big Chakra reveal. I kind of wanted to talk about.
Well, it's shocking.
It's Chakra-ing.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I like it. I might have to watch it again and watch it with that in mind. What about the reversal of the first chakra? Is that an inversion as well? Does that work as an inversion, do you think?
Yeah, because the first chakra, the Muladhara, that's when you're like anally retentive. He's holding on to everything. He's trying to keep a grip on his constant K. He's got to maintain his baseline. And then in the last scene, he's letting go of everything. He's dead. So
right. Yep. I think that works pretty well. What about the third then?
Yeah. So
throat chakra, stomach chakra.
Yeah. So maybe, so in the third chakra, he is kicking ass in the orphanage scene, right? Mm-hmm. He shoots all those guys. He punches the orphanage owner, but then when he's fighting his dad, he's getting his ass kicked. His dad's, whooping him. So,
all right.
There's that. He's, instead of dishing it out, he's taking it. Yeah.
Yeah. That works for me. So what about the other giant women? There's this constant reminder of sex in the form of gigantic women. There's gigantic women in Deckard's hideout because he's in Vegas. Gigantic women bouncing around the city as projections.
And in Enemy.
I was thinking about that as well. Is this a Villeneuve thing? Is he just like giant women and feet, or is this is there something important about that specifically in this film?
So in the script, in the scene when he goes to Vegas, the statues there are supposed to be a bunch of Egyptian gods, and so the thing that stuck out in my mind was the statues kind of reminded me of those statues in A Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
And that whole scene is very orange. So yes. I don't know.
The orange thing might be a reach, right? But the statues are like at the beginning scene where they're sitting in the room drinking milk, and the statues are sort of just reinforcing that nihilism looks like culture, looks like it looks classy, it can, and so in Clockwork Orange, the reason that you have the rape scene juxtaposed with, I believe it's Beethoven, right? Why do you have those two things together? Well, in a sense, you have those two things together because one of these represents the ultimate in sort of refinement and beauty and craft, and the other is this scene, this primal scene, a rape scene. Putting these two things together is sort of to say this I don't know how do I want to say, this act is what we've come to as a species, is that we can put these two things together, and it doesn't matter, right? It's the culmination of nihilism to have the most beautiful thing and the most horrific thing side by side, layered on top of each other, right?
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, it sounds like you just explained that whole scene and the reason why there's statues, because you said. It's the Clockwork Orange. It's the ultimate scene of nihilism, culture and nihilism. And then in that scene, or in the movie, we've also got the idea that you've got to rescue the father from culture, right? And so Deckard goes to Las Vegas, where you have the height of nihilistic culture, and Kay has to rescue Deckard, the father, from that culture so that he can unite it with the creative powers of his daughter, I guess, or release the power that his daughter holds. So I think you just explained it, right?
Yeah, and there's a I don't know if you remember, there's a quote about the fall of Rome, and the fall of Rome, you had essentially a breakdown of social norms, but ultimate sophistication, right? So so Beethoven represents sophistication, but sophistication without feeling, right? Sophistication without feeling is what you get when a civilization collapses, where it looks refined and it's bringing things from the past. The creations have cast back and brought back things from the past that look like beauty and look like art and look like feeling, but they're empty. And so it's Vegas. It's
Caesar's Palace.
Yes, it has no feel. I can't remember the entire quote, but it is something like sophistication without feeling is. I can't remember the whole thing, but it was about that idea of emptiness looking like refinement.
Yeah. I was trying to figure out why there would be the huge statues of the women as well, and I couldn't fit it. But man, you just gave it to me. that was awesome. So, and God, yeah, like you have, and then the whole fall of Rome thing you just mentioned. I mean, that's, you've got this vapid opulence that is, it just leads to destruct. Like there's no feeling. There's no. I didn't. Not at the birth of tragedy, but at the beginning of one of Nietzsche's, what is it called? The Birth of Tragedy. And when he wrote his critique of the birth of tragedy, didn't he kind of talk about that a little bit, something to that effect? Or
I can't remember. Last time I read Birth of Tragedy was in college. I read a lot of the Nietzsche, Antichrist. I read in college. I forget a lot of it, so I'm getting back into it, but I haven't got through all of it yet, but I'm working on it. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all that seems to fit really well for that scene, which just makes this movie so incredibly deep. It's like a sci-fi Finnegan's Wake with what makes way more chronological or way more apparent sense. You can mine it forever. Yeah. I think I've got it. The definition of decadence. Decadence is sophistication without feeling. That's the quote. Decadence is sophistication without feeling. And when a civilization crumbles, all you have is decadence. And decadence is the reason that nothing feels real and people are reaching for anything that might be real because there's no feeling. So that's why Madame drinks. That's why Kay jumps on daffodil. That's why the tiniest thread of the genuine collapses the whole system, because the decadence knob is turned up to 11, and it's same with Rome, right? The marriage in Rome became this sort of farce. The whole marriage system, and marriage went from a serious tradition to this farcical, ridiculous political face system where who you're married to for this 5-year period has nothing to do with the traditional value of marriage that was there earlier on in Roman society. Because people had lost touch with what it means to have a marriage and what it means to exist in a marriage, what it means to have a partner and a spouse had no meaning anymore. So it was a mockery of marriage. And that's, I think, what is described by, I think it's Camille Paglia as decadence. Okay. And I think we have a lot of that going on today as well, and will probably increase over time, I would imagine. Not trying to be political, but it does look like that. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you. Did you mind the significance of Nabokov's Pale Fire? That's one area that I didn't. Yeah. Well, one thing that. So when I think Kay is having to repeat some of the lines in his baseline test from Nabokov's Pale Fire, one of them is a tall white fountain against a dark background played, and I think that's symbolic of Kay being the tall white fountain against like a destroyed background, because he's distinct from that background as a life-giving. Maybe it's him, maybe it's a reference to Anna, but I think that's the metaphor there, that he finally becomes the fountain. But then, like,
her room is Anna's room is white, though. Her room is pristine and white. It could be either one of them. The background is probably the giant piles of junk and trash. But
yeah.
It could be either one of them, but certainly Anna's room as a perfect object, even pure of germs, sort of stands in as a creative. It's a fountain of creativity. She's creating
a font of creativity.
Yeah, it's a fountain. She's creating memories like a fountain, and it's sort of flowing out from her, but she can't move because she's the fountain. So to me, just thinking through it as you say that, it makes more sense that she's the fountain because she's the source of the water. The water's coming out of her.
Yeah, and I mean, if as a stretch, I mean, because Kay is the twin, he is her in a sense, then they identify with each other. Maybe he kind of, because he is crucial in her goals, like he is kind of in fact part of being that fountain, like that fountain actualizing, rather than being contained forever in that bubble. She's going to be released, so he gets to partake in that actualization of the fountain. Maybe I don't know.
That makes sense. How about any big things that we didn't really get to talk about? Because I have some things sort of as a rapid fire, sort of a speed round, some ideas, but any bigger things that in your notes or what you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to talk about? And we covered quite a lot, and we did go kind of in order. More or less. With
the chakra thing, so the heart chakra is in the middle of the whole system, and almost right in the middle of the movie, that's when Kay meets Anna. So it seems just another reason to say I think these guys were trying to use the chakra system to build a spine for a narrative. Anyway, there's that. But and honestly, we covered so much of the things that I've always wanted to talk about concerning this movie.
I think if anyone were to use something like that absolutely deliberately, whether it's the pollen path or the chakra system, it would be our old pal Mr. Villeneuve. He's the guy to do that. He did it. Every film I watch of his, on reflection, am really just astounded at his ability to work these things in without them seeming contrived.
Yeah.
Because you could put those things in and it would be very clunky, but it's so organic, such that you could talk about it and I agree with you, but someone else could say, well, I don't think so. And they might have another thing that they could talk about which may work as well. And so that's a good indication that it's not forced in there, because someone could come up with another explanation that's not chakras, that's not the Navajo twins. But I agree with you that I think those two things are, especially maybe the chakras, but especially the twins, because of the bees, because there's no other reason to have the bees. Why would you have bees?
Yeah.
And he was probably thinking of that. How can I do this? I'll just put some bees in there.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like anybody, like, what kind of sense are you going to make of that scene? I mean, there's I don't know. There's some
He did it for you, man. He did it just for you.
Denis, thank you so much. It's like, I think anybody watching is like, why the hell are there bees out here in Vegas, in a bombed out Vegas? Maybe they have some connection to radiation or something, but I don't know.
Well, I think the standard takeaway from that is this radiation thing is not it's not real, or it's just his shell that he's created so that he can protect himself, and somehow it's an illusion. You can still, it's Maya. You have life inside of it, and the bees are alive, but it could have just as easily been a bunch of squirrels.
Threshold guardians.
Why is it not squirrels? You know,
I wonder if the bees are threshold guardians.
Maybe, or maybe not.
Yeah.
All right, speed round. A couple things we didn't talk about. Well, let me cross out one of these because we did talk about giant women, so let me get rid of that. 4 things that I have. Angels.
Yeah.
Anything?
Oh, yeah. So when love is, speaking of angels, because he says angel, and then she's kind of an angel of death.
Yes.
And well, in a big sense, I mean, she's just going around knocking people off, and then, like the death from above thing, where she's sending rockets from above. Angel, up above, sending death down, death below. Mm-hmm. But I think that was it for me. Did you get something else?
Well, unless there is a reference to Anna being something like a Sophia character. There could be a sort of demiurge thing going on there.
Answers in Job.
Mm-hmm.
Or answers to Job. Yeah.
Yes, but I didn't get that from there. But I mean, there could be. In Gnosticism, Sophia is that sort of character. She has a twofold nature, and one is the creator, but the creator of the demiurge, right? And so that might be it. She's kind of a lower tier angel, maybe.
I was thinking she could also be Padme, the like consort of Vishnu, because she's kind of Wallace's, I don't know, male female kind of thing. In the script, she's supposed to revere Wallace like a father, and her name isn't actually Love. It's just like kind of the English pet name for someone. Oh yeah, have a bit of honey with that, love. Kind of that. That's as far as it goes. Her name isn't Love. It's just an affectionate term.
Interesting. Okay.
But she looks at him like a father figure. She wants to be accepted by him so desperately.
I wonder if there's it's not really hinted at, but I wonder if there's a conflict going on within her, that she has her own kind that she's fighting against, and she represents the opposite of her interests in a sense.
She cries when he slits open the stomach of the replicant that is birthed, when they have the birthing scene where the replicant comes out of the plastic bag. Then Wallace finds out that she can't bear children, so he just kills her, slices her open on the spot, and Love is back there. I think she sheds a tear. So she's got the conflict, it seems.
I think so, but it's very minor in her actions. She's very much a bulldog in her actions.
I did have one thing I wanted to mention. So Kay, as a sacrificial kind of Jesus figure, he always gets wounded in his right side. He gets wounded in his right arm. He gets wounded like 2 times in his side. And like Addis, Thomas, and Adonis and Jesus, they're all sacrificial savior figures who get wounded in their right side.
I didn't pick up on that. That's good.
And it happens like multiple times. So anyway.
Damn it, Dennis. Stop it. Huge brands. Atari is one. Peugeot, I think, is another one. Pan Am. Giant.
Diageo.
Is it Piaggio or Peugeot?
Oh, Peugeot, but then there's another brand called Diageo. They own a bunch of...
Sorry, I misheard you.
Yeah, they're a brand that I know at least owns a lot of alcohol brands. I think they might own Guinness. So,
what do you make of that? Giant brand logos. I mean, obviously, there's just the culmination of this progression toward giant corporations being the enforcers of this movement toward progress as what's new, progress as the superficial, progress as gadgets and as pleasure, seeking pleasure on the surface, and these big brands being the ones who gather all real things into themselves in order to continue to dominate this landscape. I mean, now you would see this little startup of 6 people. They're very excited about their idea. They have a new thing they're very excited to bring into the world. They bring it into the world. They get an angel investor. They get it $1 million. They grow it to this size, and then Google comes in and goes, "I'll buy you for $200 million." And they say, "Yeah, okay." And then it's now owned by Google. So that's what I was getting out of it. The reason that the logos are giant is just that these are the bulldogs of this track of technology Hegelian progress.
Yeah, I hope that so. What I think is that's where all Denis Villeneuve's money to make this movie came from, and that's why you've got the huge ads from specifically those people.
No, but Atari is not one of those. Atari is not I don't think Atari is a big company. I mean, that was in the original Blade Runner.
Yeah, and I think that's the big reason, no pun intended, why Atari is in there, because it's a nod to the original, much like having Harrison Ford in the movie is a nod to the original. But so I think, here's what I think, is that when, I don't know, maybe either Denis Villeneuve approached somebody about making the movie or somebody approached him about making the movie, they said, all right, look, if we're going to make this movie, you got to have Harrison Ford in it, because it's a trend in movies to kind of have a nod to the old, like the original version, like Indiana Jones 4 had to have Harrison Ford in it. I mean, think about all the other movies now that they're using the nostalgia kick to draw in a crowd.
The trend is not bring in the old actors. The trend is bring in Harrison Ford.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a Harrison Ford trend. It's not any other trend. It's just a Harrison Ford trend.
Yeah, I mean, just like the first movie in the new Star Wars trilogy. You know, it's a bunch of nods to the old stuff. So because it's like, I think they can't get it made if they don't do it, because if they did something completely new, they wouldn't be guaranteed people showing up because of the nostalgia factor, because it wouldn't be there. So the nostalgia thing, I think, was at play. But
judoed that pretty well, though, into they judoed that into a good story, because it could be contrived.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if it's like, okay, if that's going to be my stipulation, how do I do this? Okay, well, I'll just make the story how the two came to their father and weave that in here, and we'll put a bee colony in there so that people think I wasn't just pandering to get this movie made. It's actually really good.
What would Matt like is his metric for success. Anything else on the huge brands? I mean, do you think it was just brand deals, or do you think that anything else, or is it just? I mean, I think it's meant to just reinforce this barren planet equals decadence.
Yeah, I
equals huge brands owning everything, stomping on the little guys.
I think it works. Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it. It just kind of does two birds with one stone. One tiny little detail that I thought might be cool to mention is that in the scene where Deckard is talking to Harrison Ford and he's kind of up in the penthouse, right before they see, or right when they see the like Love and her cronies coming to take him away or whatever, there's these little clay figurines of these Chinese figures, like these little replicas of the terracotta army. And the terracotta army was buried with a king, right?
Yep.
So again, this is more that resurrection and the king motif being not implemented, but implied by Denis Villeneuve. So I just noticed that for the first time the last time I watched it. So it just kind of a cool thing.
That ties into the next thing I wanted to say.
Great.
Two more things I wanted to mention, which is the East and West. By the way, I think that there's another tomb that they know is if not as big as the tomb of the Terracotta Warriors, on par with it or close. But they won't open it up because they want to just keep it. So they know it's there, but they won't open it, which I think is pretty cool. It's sort of like a respect for the past. Like they actually respect that this thing is somehow spiritually significant. The fact that it's not touched. Okay, we'll have one tourist attraction and we'll leave the other one. Very practical, kind of utilitarian in that sense. But East and West, though, there's a lot of Japanese language used. The systems, the computer system is in Japanese. There's Korean on some of the casinos. There's Chinese characters here and there. So you have this blend of East and West, but it doesn't seem like a blend of East and West in the spiritual sense that you would hope for in the future. At least I would hope, oh, great, so maybe some Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, spirituality ekes its way westward, and we get this maybe new religion or new worldview that integrates everything. That would be cool. But what it looks like here is...
That's Dune, by the way. That's the next movie.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can't wait for that one. What it looks like here is consumerism has reached the East, and then the East came back with a regurgitation of consumerism, something along those lines. Like you puked it into our mouths, and then we pooped it back to you, and now it's even worse. It's a downward spiral. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I didn't. I mean, I noticed that there were there's a lot of Asian characters on the buildings and whatnot, but the thing you just pulled out, it's just a matter. It's like the cultural exchange or the philosophical exchange hasn't happened. You just got, how are we going to make money? Essentially, it's kind of the extent and the depth of the exchange.
The corruption of the East by the West, leading to then the integration of the corrupted East into the West.
Yes,
and a downward spiral into the toilet. Culminating
basically.
Let's just start dumping the junk over there, and in the meantime, let's figure out how to get off this stupid planet. Right?
Yeah,
that's what it is. I mean, the whole mentality of humanity, and the reason I mentioned the thing before about the branches is there's a point where you're a species and you can go one of two ways, and we've already passed the point. We're already done. It just hasn't played out yet, right? The branch has been passed. We're on a branch that's a dead end. It may last another 5, 10, 20, 30,000 years. We're going to be in 9-star systems or 100-star systems. Yeah. But this iteration of this species is done already because it passed a point in its evolution where it would have been able to change course. And there's an example from... It's what TV show is? It's a TV show. I can't remember what it is. It might be Stargate, which is an underrated show. It's actually a pretty good show. There's a race of aliens. I think they're the Asgardians. They integrate the gods, and they started down the path of manipulating their DNA and cloning themselves into future bodies. But because they started down that path, it ultimately led to the copy error issue that they couldn't resolve. So the copy error issue meant that once they started, they couldn't organically reproduce anymore. They had to continue cloning, and it was a continuation of degradation leading to eventually their extinction. So they became immortals. They became gods. But as soon as you become a god, then you've crossed the threshold into the end of you. But it hasn't played out yet. And I think that sort of humanity is reaching God status with a Wallace type figure. But as soon as that happens, it's the death knell on humanity. And it may look externally like, oh, you're out there making progress, but somehow it's not.
Yeah. I feel like, it's something I harp on all the time, especially in the denial of death discussion we're doing. But yeah, like we never criticize the idea of progress, and I don't feel like I'm against the idea of progress. It's just like, well, we haven't really answered the question. Well, we might benefit a lot from answering the questions, what are we progressing away from and what are we progressing towards? And we can let this idea, instead of controlling progression can control us, and it can lead in ways that, we've got 14K TVs, but we live in garbage heaps. We're living in, idiocracy, where maybe if we tune the progression in a different way, we might not end up in a future where things are really bad.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's at least a way to think about it and a way to interpret the sort of society level message of the film.
Like what about progressing in teaching everybody how to not be such a slave to fear and desire? I mean, that'd be great progress, where people aren't walking around feeling that thing and then all the reacting to that impulse in the lizard brain part of your body and then causing hell for everybody else. Progress in mitigating, controlling, understanding, and maybe in fact dancing with those impulses so that they don't destroy us.
But it has to work itself into the incentive structure of civilization, because currently the incentive structure there's one dimension. And the dimension is how much money do you make? How economically successful are you? What is the GDP? What is your personal income? All of those things. That's the only dimension that matters. So you can't expect anything else. You couldn't expect people to learn how to deal with desire and aversion. You couldn't expect people to learn that in a system which optimizes for the dimension of profit. But if there was a change in the incentive structure, then naturally there would be an optimization for that sort of thing. But it would have to work its way in from somewhere. I don't know where that would come from. It would have to work its way in from somewhere that is not where things are working their way in from now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It seems like that is a place that the whole hero's journey could be applicable. Where's the parzival that's going to come in, and whether that would be a person or an idea. I mean, it doesn't have to be a person. It could be like a level of consciousness that's opened up, a disease, shrooms, psilocybins, or stuff that Terence McKenna talks about.
It's helpful to anthropomorphize things and talk about them as specifically as heroes, because that's easy to talk about. But I think, certainly you could say, well, that represents this movement, that represents this group of people doing something new, which eventually becomes a meme that spreads. So,
I think that's what this movie's trying to do. It's almost like it's just one part in an organismal push to try to realize, we've got this crummy stuff around us. How do we get out of that? How do we break that cycle? Where do we get the new, fresh, rejuvenating creativity? So, I think this movie and movies like this are just the time, the the products of creativity and culture in time when they're needed to try to compel that new thing into birth, like into reality.
So that means that Denis is K in a sense. He's just a body carrying out an evolutionary need to help the species reach a point of enlightenment that will allow us to not fall off the cliff. So thank you, Denis. But sorry.
Yeah, well, just like us talking about it, you know, just like anybody. It's but you know, he probably, I'd like to imagine he enjoys making this movie. He enjoys this type of work and getting to realize this kind of psychological, philosophical, artistic phenomenon in reality. Just kind of, you know, just like you and I, we really enjoy doing this stuff, and just it's almost like you're just bearing. Yeah, if it was, it's my fault.
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's just okay.
There's something to it, and I think we can pretty much wrap it up here. But I think there's something to the creative. This is something we're also talking about in our other group. There's something about the creative. There's something about making and doing that is, you are at least creating an objective for your neurosis personally and culturally that gives you a way to manage what otherwise would be entirely directed inward and would destroy you and basically put you in a constant fantasy state that would not allow you to do anything or act, which is like, I remember reading a quote from Stanley Kubrick, who said the hardest part about directing a movie is getting out of the car at the beginning of the day. Like a crushing feeling of. Have you ever experienced that before you start a big project? Before you do it, before you start it, you just sit there for half an hour and think, why is this so hard? But then you start it and it starts to flow. But just getting out of the car is this Herculean task, I think. And that's something. There's something about creativity that is hard. That is a bump that you have to get over. And once you get over it, it starts to flow.
100%, for sure.
You experience that with your work a little bit now and then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the strangest. It's the damnedest thing. I think, oh God, do I want to draw and paint right now? Ah, man, I know what's coming. I got to do all this. But then I just sit down, you have a task ahead of you. You just sit down, start picking away a little chunk of it, and it just goes.
It goes.
And then you get, especially when you have the good fortune to be able to get into a flow state and it flies by, and then you just keep doing it, and then it's done, and it's like, wow.
But often the first little mark is somehow hard. I sometimes find myself just, I'm not an artist in the way that you are, but in the same way, something creative, just making the first mark is very hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can end it here. I think we've covered a lot, and it's good. I can say it's good to be back.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. So if those of you watching, if you are interested in or enjoyed the conversation, then feel free to just follow us and check out the old Patreon if you wanna support. We'll have a link to that in the description. Anything else, Matt, that we didn't talk about or didn't cover that we should mention or say that I didn't say?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we're just picking up kind of where we left off. We've got a lot. I think we both have a lot more things we're excited to tackle and talk about. And man, it's been great. It's been a joy.
I'm glad we finally got to this because we've been talking about this for a long time.